Hi! In this video, you'll learn how to make a cozy raglan sleeve coat, a perfect project if it's your first time sewing a coat. In the description, you'll find a link to the pattern. Don't forget that you can turn on subtitles and translate them into any language. If you have any questions or need help, you're welcome to reach out to me on Etsy. And now, let's get started. Cut all pieces from the main fabric and the lining. In the files provided, you'll find a detailed cutting guide indicating how many of each piece to cut, where to apply fusible interfacing, and a sample cutting layout for size 36. Prepare the back pieces. Place them right sides together and pin along the center back. Stitch together 1/2 inch below the vent marking. Fold the vent lines according to the pattern and pin them in place. Finish the raw edges of the pockets using an overlocker, zigzag stitch, or bind them with bias tape. Fold down the top edge of the pocket following the pattern guide and stitch the side seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Baste around the outer edge of the pocket, approximately 3/8 inch from the edge. Trim the corners and turn the pocket right side out. A helpful tip: cut a pocket template out of sturdy cardboard and use it to shape your pocket. Press the edges over the template. Repeat these steps for the second pocket. Place the finished pocket on the coat front and pin it in place. Then baste it. I prefer to attach the pocket by hand using an invisible stitch so as not to disturb the texture of the fluffy fabric. But of course, if you'd rather, you can top stitch it in place by machine. Here's what the finished pocket looks like. Next, sew the bust darts on the coat front. Since my fabric is very thick, I cut the dart open and press the allowances to the sides. Repeat for the other front piece. Place the front and back pieces of the coat right sides together and sew the side seams. Now prepare the front and back sleeve pieces. Place right sides together and sew along the shoulder seam. Press the seam allowances open and stitch the sleeve closed along the underarm seam. Repeat for the second sleeve. Prepare the coat's armscye. Pin the sleeve to the coat body, matching the notches. Raglan sleeves are a great choice for beginners. They're easy to sew and don't require easing in excess fabric. Stitch the sleeve in place on the machine, sewing on the sleeve side, not the body side. Now let's make the belt loops. You can sew fabric loops and attach them on top, or, like I did, create loops using thicker thread. I marked 1 inch above and below the waist notch using pins. I insert the needle from the wrong side and catch a small piece of fabric on the right side, forming a loop. Then, I slip my fingers through the loop and pull the thread through to make a chain stitch. Repeat until you reach the desired length. Finally, pull the needle through the last loop and secure it on the wrong side. You'll notice I already have the lining attached. I forgot to do the loops earlier, so just pretend it's not there. On the wrong side, I secure the ends of the threads to the seam allowance with a dense machine stitch, which ensures they'll stay put. Now let's move on to sewing the belt. On the pattern, you'll find a diagonal line marked on one of the belt pieces. You can transfer this to the fabric and join the two belt pieces at a 45-degree angle. This creates a more polished, professional-looking finish. However, it's completely fine to sew them together along a straight edge instead, if you prefer. Press the seams and trim the excess. Fold the belt right sides together and stitch, leaving a gap secured with back stitches so you can turn it right side out. Clip the corners and trim one seam allowance, but don't trim within the opening. Turn the belt right side out and press it. close the opening by hand using an invisible stitch. Sew the darts on the front lining pieces and press them. Pin the front lining to the front facing. The lining is 5/8 inch shorter at the bottom, so position it accordingly on the outer fabric. Stitch and press. At the center back of the lining, we need to create a pleat. This will allow for ease of movement and help prevent the lining from tearing. The yellow line marks the line from which you measure to create the stitching line, shown in red. Press the pleat in place. You'll find a detailed step-by-step guide for this element in the pattern files, so don't worry if it seems confusing at first. This is what the completed back lining looks like. Place the front and back lining pieces right sides together and sew the side seams. From this point, the process is the same as for the main fabric. Sew the sleeves and attach them to the lining. Now for the collar. For this step, use the collar piece that was cut on the bias. A collar cut like this drapes softly around the neck instead of sitting stiffly. Use a long machine stitch to baste along the collar, blue line, and neckline, red line, both 1/2 inch from the edge. The yellow dots indicate seam intersections. Clip into the corners and neckline. Place the collar right sides together with the lining and pin it in place. Sew between the yellow dots. Thanks to the clipped corner, you can pivot the collar and attach it to the front facing. Repeat these steps for the main fabric. Place the coat and the facing right sides together and pin all around the edges. Sew around the entire edge of the coat. When joining the collar and the lapel, you don't need to stitch all the way to the very end. It's okay to leave a small opening there. It's difficult to demonstrate this clearly at the machine, as the coat is quite large and heavy, which makes it hard to maneuver. This is how it looks after stitching. Here I'm showing you the area where the seams don't need to be joined with perfect precision. It's fine to leave a small gap. It won't be visible once the coat is turned right side out. Trim the corners, turn the coat right side out, and press. Only after pressing, grade the seams by trimming one of the seam allowances to reduce bulk along the edge. Turn the coat right side out again and align the seam allowances of the upper and under collar. Pin in place and stitch by hand or machine. I hand sewed mine. Now onto the hem. Baste 1 3/16 inch from the lower edge all around the coat. This will be your folding guide later. On the lining vent, sew a guideline 1/2 inch from the edge and clip the corners. These are the fold lines that will help finish the vent. We'll finish it by hand since this is a beginner-friendly coat. Fold the edges along the helper stitches. You can press and baste them for better control. Starting from the top of the vent, align the folded edge so the seam allowances of both the outer fabric and the lining match up. At the bottom, the lining should be 5/8 inch shorter, meaning it shouldn't reach all the way to the edge of the main fabric. As you can see, in my case the lining likely stretched a bit, but at the vent it's not especially important. I basted the vent with thread, and now it's time to hand stitch. As you can see, I catch a tiny bit of the lining with the needle, then slide the needle under and out again past the edge. Thanks to the fluffy texture of my fabric, the hand stitching is completely hidden. I stitch all the way around the vent, and now it needs to be secured. Simply sew diagonally through all layers, just below the edge of the lining. In the sleeve lining, you'll need a large opening secured with back stitching on both sides. This is where we'll turn the coat right side out after hemming the bottom. Turn the coat inside out and match the bottom hem of the coat and lining, right sides together. Start by matching the side seams, as the vent can be misleading. On the front side of the coat, pull the facing down to match the level of the lining, which is shorter. This way, the facing will be sewn in at a slight angle. At the center front, sew 1 3/16 inch straight, then curve gently down to 1/2 inch and continue stitching to the vent. Trim the excess fabric and corners. Turn the coat right side out. Using the basting line we made earlier, pin the hem in place. Baste it with thread. Repeat on the other side. Baste the vent as well. To prevent the coat edges from rolling outward, I'll secure them from the inside by hand. Or you can top stitch by machine. Totally up to you. I start by basting the edges, then hand stitch from the inside, catching just the interfacing threads. Hem the bottom edge and the vent using a hand stitch. I take a full bite of the seam allowance and a single thread from the interfacing. Not the prettiest method, but quick, durable, and invisible from the outside. Hem the sleeve with a 2-inch allowance and baste it. To attach the sleeve lining to the sleeve hem, arrange the lining inside the sleeve as it should lie in the finished coat. Secure one point with a pin, turn the sleeve inside out through the opening, remove the pin, and stitch in place. This way you ensure the seams won't get twisted. Secure the hem with a hand stitch, and the sleeves are complete. The only thing left is to close the opening in the sleeve. Simply fold the edges with wrong sides together and either top stitch or hand sew invisibly, whichever you prefer. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more sewing tutorials.